broken my own rule of not starting promptly on time. But it's amazing to see so many familiar faces here, some new ones too that I've had great conversations with about the work here. I do want to make sure I do some housekeeping first and make sure I do a sound check. Can you hear me back there? Okay. Great. I can project even more if I need to. I do want to thank Andy, who is the shop owner, for reserving space here this evening. Andy is a huge proponent of the arts and reserves this space every month to allow artists to come in and not just promote their work, but share their work. So thank you, Andy, and the crew. Thanks for the GrowthQuakes signature drink this evening as well. I might have one after the show.
At what temperature?
Yes.
Extra.
So, Andy, thanks again. And I plug the GrowthQuakes drink. If you haven't had it, try it. I'm not a coffee drinker, but it's pretty good. And I also want to take a few minutes to thank the people that helped me collaborate on this. And it's not just what you're seeing here, that I had fantastic collaborators behind the scenes talking to some really amazing, dear, and wonderful friends about the work and getting great feedback. And going for walks and talking about how I could visually kind of present the work so that it represents not just the theme of the work, but the tangible part that helps you feel what the work is. So that was an important part of the collaboration as well. So I collaborated with several people in this room actually. A few of the pieces, I'll go through them individually, of course, as I'm kind of reading out, but a big shout out to Jeremy, who is my husband. And a big shout out, he actually helped me really promote this event on his Instagram channel, Jeremy in Lowell, in case you do not follow him, and you need to know what is going on in Lowell tonight, yesterday, tomorrow, 2 weeks from now. Follow him, he's on there, and he has been amazing helping to promote this. But also, he actually took part in helping create one of the pieces here. I wrote it, but he cross-stitched this piece right here, which I think turned out great. And you'll see whenever I get a chance to read it that the really beautiful, ornate, kind of grandma style of the cross stitch is a little bit of ironic twist to the poem. So you'll hear that a little bit later. Also, she's not here tonight, but Kristen Carrier, who also helped me with some of the design as well. And so it's my unique and wonderful experience to have a great band of creative thinkers and creative minds helping me get here tonight. And just the support has just been overwhelming and wonderful. Love it. Okay, so probably the hardest part about this whole evening is coming up next, where I have to talk a little bit about the artist. So I'm going to read what is actually on the placard there, and then I'll kind of fill in some gaps there as well. So about the artist, that is me, Rick Hall. I am a Lowell-based storyteller and poet who grew up in a small farming community on the prairie of central Illinois, the son of a father with southern roots, that's important to remember that, and a homemaker mother born and raised in central Illinois. I'm the youngest of 21 kids. And I come from a long lineage of farmers, and you'll notice that a lot of the imagery I use is very based in nature, nature-focused, and a lot of the imagery that I use is also kind of echoes many of the stories that have been handed down to me from my family, particularly my dad, who was an amazing storyteller. But we had a very complex and complicated relationship, which you will hear about as well. But some of those images and some of those characters will also be coming forth through that. My unique upbringing has shaped my perspective on everything from my relationships with nature to the way I connect with people and nurture the relationships that I have with people, all of which continue to influence my storytelling and my writing. So that's a little bit about me. I also threw in a little bit of additional detail that we'll get into later, especially when I start performing the poems. And I am calling this a poetry performance, not a reading, because whenever, particularly for these pieces, sometimes whenever and there are writers in the room, so they will understand this. Sometimes whenever you're writing, you're trying to channel a voice. Sometimes it comes from nowhere. Sometimes it comes from a specific person that inspires you, and you know that you have to channel the right voice, and sometimes a character literally will take over. And the words are no longer mine. They are coming from somebody else. That is, I'm the vessel, and that character is literally taking over and writing it. The dialogue is there, the speech is there, the pattern is there, the whole personality is there, and while it's part of me, it's also separate from me. And I use those characters to really project to sometimes a specific audience the purpose behind the piece, and the writing it is a flavor that's added to it that is necessary, at least for me and my writing. It's necessary, and I know that a lot of those characters come from many of the stories that I've been told, many of the stories that I've created, and many of the characters that have been inspired by the people that I know. So take that to heart. And some of these characters really are me. They are my voice. Some of them are more direct. A couple of these are going to be my genuine self coming through, and where I didn't need a character to channel for a specific purpose. So keep that in mind. You'll be able to tell which is which. I'll give you a heads up on those two. Also, I do my best whenever I'm having a conversation. Whenever I'm sitting one-on-one with a person and just having a heart-to-heart conversation and talking about what's important to me, the themes that I cover always come out whenever I'm having a heart-to-heart with somebody, and I often consider myself lucky because I think I have a special and unique talent and gift to use my ability to connect with people to put a mirror up to them and say, this is how I see you. Do you see you this way? Do you see how amazing you are? Because I see it, and that's why I was inspired to write it. Because you are in this, and it's so important whenever I do have that type of inspiration that a couple of these poems have been gifts that I've said, I wrote this for you, but I'm not just going to give it to you for you to read. An important part of poetry that I had a great conversation with a friend while we were on a walk, and she said to me, she goes, I think people are afraid of poetry. There is a barrier between them and poetry, and sometimes it seems elusive, and if you're just reading it without the author's voice, I think there is a distance that can happen. And so whenever I am inspired by a single person or an event or a GrowthQuake, I'll talk about that in a minute, it's always important for me to read the piece to them, as hard as that can be. I have to do it. I have to read it in that character's voice so that they know how I see them and show them, put the mirror up to them. Now, the whole GrowthQuakes concept, as I was pulling these pieces together, I was thinking, what's the common theme? Why do I keep going back to these specific pieces? And then it occurred to me that these are all moments where I had an opportunity, either before I was writing, while I was writing, or after I was writing, sometimes years after I was writing, where I had the epiphany that I was like, oh my gosh, that was when I was going through this. That was a huge moment of growth for me. And when I reflect back on those moments, and I think about how I was feeling, what I was going through in those times, and I realized that if I had listened more closely and felt more intently inside before writing or while writing, that I would have realized that I needed to pay attention to those tremors that are telling you this is a moment. Listen, feel it, pay attention, because it's quaking underneath. You might not realize it right now, but I think we all intuitively are born with that ability to pay attention to those moments. I personally can remember, everybody accuses me of having a ridiculous memory of going back to, they're like, how can you possibly remember when you were that young? I remember vividly one of my greatest frustrations when I was little was not having the words to communicate properly. And that frustration, I remember it so vividly, not being able to communicate and express what I was feeling when I was trying to tell somebody what I needed or what I wanted or how I was feeling. And I remember very vividly that frustration. And it was almost pre-verbal, so I was very, very young. I remember that frustration. So I remember that growth quake, thinking if I could only communicate better, they would understand me, they would get it, they would hear me, hear the real me that's trying to express something. And to complicate matters further, I grew up in a very chaotic household, as you can imagine, with my really severely alcoholic, abusive father who reigned over the household, who was a major influence. When he wasn't drinking, he could tell the stories and keep you on the edge of your seat. It was amazing. And I remember so many nights sitting in the kitchen and listening to his stories, and sometimes he would be on the edge of, loosening up with the drink. And it was always you were waiting for that tremor to tell you it's going over the edge. And then you took that in as a child and knew when to withdraw, because the rage would eventually come out. And you could be, if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, be a victim to that rage. And so I learned at a very, very early age how to detect and predict those tremors that I could see in my father. But it also taught me how to see those tremors in other people, but also not let it be all-encompassing and never, ever extinguish my light. That was so important. So, enough there. I also want to make sure that, getting back to the conversation element, if you have anything that you want to talk about during the performance, ask questions, make comments. talk about the themes, talk about the imagery. I want to hear it because I need from you to recognize that I'm projecting that mirror and holding it up and making it universal enough so that people understand what I'm trying to project back to them. So talk, I want to hear it, ask questions. I'll stop there for a moment if anybody has any questions. I am not afraid of awkward silence. Not at all. Maybe low. And I have been accused of being an over-communicator, so if I'm like trying to point out way too much, I'll pick up on that on the anti-tobacco. Okay. Seriously, any questions, comments? Okay. So, I am going to start with a poem that's right here, and it's called Home. And the reason why I'm starting with that, I actually wrote this one in repose, shall we say. I was in bed, it was late at night, and I had just learned that a friend of mine was moving on, taking another position. And so I was like, oh my gosh, she is somebody who is worthy of words and worthy to know how I feel about her. I wanted to hold a mirror up for her to show her how I felt. And for some reason, the theme of home kept coming back to me. But at the same time, I literally, maybe I have too vivid of an imagination, but I kept picturing myself literally floating, and it makes me uncomfortable even talking about it, floating, untethered in outer space. And it just, I mean, my breathing started getting heavier because I was so uncomfortable feeling completely disengaged. I felt like that there was a separation about to happen there with my friend. And it made me just think of what it would feel like to be floating weightless in space, and it just made me so uncomfortable. But this is what came out of it, and it was a GrowthQuake moment for me. And it didn't take me too long to realize that after I wrote it and shared it with her and had a conversation with her about it. So, all right, poem number 1, Home. Beyond the reaches of space, a soul could float weightless without an anchor to tether it to its home, its purpose. What only a few understand is that the soul is the anchor. It is home. And the tether is the strand of light that connects it to all other souls, illuminating the path home. Now, it occurred to me after I wrote this and after I had a conversation with her, she was like, I cannot believe that you extracted how I feel myself, as she is a foreigner from a different land. And she said that feeling of feeling disconnected and floating weightless and not feeling connected is something that I feel so often. And she said you captured it there. And it occurred to me that the theme that I'm really trying to get at is, what is home? Home isn't a place. Home is the people that surround you and that you choose to be your family, your friends, your community. That's home. It's that strand of light that illuminates your path to each other. That is home. So, but she helped me better understand that That's really what home is about. It's about people. It's not about a place. It's about people. I will stop and pause if anybody has any moments of reflection or comments or questions about anything on that poem. I do want to take a couple of minutes to just make sure that any commentary or anything is open dialogue.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Rick, I would say, honestly, tonight, being here feels like home. I feel like each new face that came in the door, everyone here was like, oh, someone else is here. So it brings us all back together in a different setting. And, it was just beautiful to watch as each new person came in and made, a little bit of connection around it.
And it's true. It's true. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to have such good, genuine and dear people and friends in my life. I'm so lucky. I will point out, Kelly, I hope you don't. Kelly has been, she has known me since I was 19 years old and had hair. And weirdly, we both ended up living, just sheer coincidence, just like a mile apart. And we're able to rekindle our friendship. And she knows my history. Sometimes she knows more of it and than I choose to remember. But it's wonderful to have that breadth of history here too, and home. She knows where home is and part of my home. So that's wonderful. So thank you for that.
I have some stories if anyone wants to hear.
Yeah. Up here. So that's home, and I intentionally chose that poem as a place to start because I wanted to make sure that we circled back there, and I want to make sure that we end up back at home. So I want to do a full circle moment toward the end. Okay. Next poem. So, this poem I actually wrote when I was probably about 21, 22 years old, and this is the cross stitch one. A wish for you upon the wind. And, the GrowthQuake moment for me that happened at that, I literally had just walked out of a cornfield in Illinois and was, plunked down 20 miles away. But to me, 20 miles away it might as well have been another planet. And it was surrounded by cornfields, but the campus was amazing, huge experience, growth experience for me. But one of the things that I learned outside of my teeny tiny town that was literally in the middle of a cornfield, Kelly has been there, is that people aren't always who they present themselves to be, and they lie. And I was so naive to think that people would just present themselves honestly, like I had always tried. And it was a shock to me to start finding out that people who I thought were friends maybe weren't my friends, and weren't being completely truthful. One great experience for me going to college was I could completely redefine who I was. And so maybe that's what they were going through as well. But, this poem was specifically written, inspired by, I'm going to say, one person who I really, took trust in, and discovered that the whole relationship was really just based on lies. And that was hurtful. It was a moment that, growth moment, absolutely. But it also made me realize, why didn't I listen to the tremors? They were there. And they were trying to tell me that something is not right. And I didn't listen. So after, I think, this moment, I really started listening a lot more closely to my own instincts. So And it also happens to be that I was taking a Shakespeare class at the time that this was written, so I wrote it in a very elevated voice, and I'll try to channel that British accent best I can, and also put a little venom on the tip of the spear as I recite it. So, and it's a haiku, so it's short. But I also was smart enough to leverage the title as much as I could to get across my point. So, a wish for you upon the event. Writhe and excrement. Oh, what foul breath we must breathe when words are but lies. That's it. So, yes, a little bit sarcastic, but you know, I've carried that poem with me inside. And I'm like, every time I uncover somebody who is not, they're not being who they say they are, I'm like, we're the next friend. Yeah, I've got your number, you know, and that's okay. You know, back then I had to learn how to navigate those personalities. And as I got better at navigating those, I also got better at listening to my moments that were GrowthQuakes and those tremors. They are with those from a very young age, and if we listen to them, I think they're taught out of us. I really do. Somehow I managed to remember my moments. You know, sometimes I'd slip away from them, but I always managed to say, okay, trust your instinct, because your instinct has it really failed you? Your instinct? Once in a while, maybe. But trust your instinct. It's there for a reason. It's taught out of us. We're taught not to trust our guts. And if you trust your gut, I think 95% of the time you're going to be right. So, okay, I'll stop there. Any commentary? Anybody have a similar experience they want to share?
I'm curious, Rick, if you wrote this down on paper at that time when you were 21 or around that time, or if you just had it fumbling around.
I did. I wrote it down because I always journaled and I always wrote poetry. That's another thing that really important thing to bring up. Even though I've worked in the corporate world my entire career, I always, even though I was exhausted from being a hardworking employee, and then later becoming a parent, God, exhausting, and trying to be a good friend and trying to be a good sibling to so many. It was hard. It was really hard, but the thing that kept centering me was my own writing and getting out those moments because they were important. I recognized that they were important enough to record. I needed to be reminded of those tremors, and that's probably what kept bringing me back to them, and then understanding that these are tremors that I knew all along that this person was lying, but I didn't listen. So I wrote it down, and even while I can't say that I was a consistent journaler or a writer, Jeremy can attest to this. There are nights at 3 a.m. when my phone light goes on. I'm like, yes, and I'm always so glad that I did. And an important side note that will come up at the end of this performance is I also am a songwriter, and I dream songs way more frequently than I sometimes wish I would, because I've never been a good sleeper. I'm sure a large part of that is probably childhood trauma. But also the subconscious is a huge tool for me. If I can wake up in a moment of creative inspiration where the creative process has already happened subconsciously, and all I have to do is record it and then read it in the morning and decide whether or not to toss it or nurture it. Those are important moments, and I will wake up for those. Sometimes I'm so exhausted and I don't want to, but I'm never sorry when I do it. So, yes, so I write in the moment. I write sometimes, when I'm out for a walk, or sometimes I'm just an observer, and I'll be like, oh my God, I have to write this down. So I try to capture the feeling, the moment, the tremors are happening. I need to capture it. So, thank you for that question. Anything else?
If this is two parts, if this poem is its first public appearance, why now? And like how that's very vulnerable. How do you get there for something you wrote when you were 21?
That is such a great question. I cannot believe I did not address that in the beginning. Because this is really, other than I did an impromptu performance of this poem, The Girl in the Light, a couple of months ago, just very impromptu. Oh, Rick, would you please read that poem? And I was like, I think I have it on my phone. I think I do. And I had a moment of clarity in that moment to ask Jeremy. I was like, oh, record me. I need to know what I look like, what I sound like. Am I delivering this message? Is the mirror being held up? I need to know it. I have no idea, because I never shared any of this in a public way at all. The closest I've ever come is on the few poems that were inspired by specific people, and I shared with them. And that's as close as I got to sharing any of them. Never published any of this. And that's not my goal. It's really not my goal. My goal is to get something out and share it with somebody else and say, do you see it too? Because I saw it. And isn't it beautiful, or isn't it scary? And isn't it painful? And sharing that and having that common light tethering you to somebody is so important. And I realized because I retired earlier this year and had more time to focus on this, I realized that, oh my God, I can reinvent me, or I can let me be the next person that emerges. The real me can emerge, and let my person, my brand shine, instead of worrying about another brand that I have to really not censor myself, but I have to be the face of that brand. Now I can be my own brand. I can be the brand that I've always wanted to project. I hope you like it, that brand. But so why now? So I've also felt this almost urgent need. When you get to be a certain age, you realize there are fewer years ahead of you than behind you. And I don't think the ghost of me would rest comfortably knowing that I did not share this message, these messages with people. I don't think I would have rested easily.
Finding all of us.
I can't promise that I won't still.
Still do.
Please come visit me.
But now is the time that I can let the real Rick emerge and share what's been inside of me all these years. I've been holding it up and only sharing it, sparse bits and important moments. But now's a great time to do it because I'm feeling free. I'm feeling free.
Love it. So,
It's a short poem. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
When I first got here, I quickly looked at it, and I thought it said, "Write in excitement." But your performance certainly gave a difference.
That is great. I'm going to remember that every time I think of this poem from now on. And you do sometimes. And I think I wrote this poem, and it's weird that it came out in haiku. You know, because I was like, oh my god, just write in your own shit. You know, I'm just tired of the lies. So I had to write it with a little bit of excitement, a little ink spilled on the page. So yes, thank you for that. That is cool.
Rick, I have a question.
Sure.
Does the person that you were writing about, did they think they lied to you?
I think that I have no idea where that person is today, but I am certain if they did not listen to the lesson, that from that relationship, if they didn't listen to it, because I'm an awesome catch.
Yeah.
On every level. I'm an awesome catch. If they didn't learn from that lesson and didn't grow from it, so if there was no growth quake for them in that moment, I hope they did. I really hope they did. And I really do. I really hope they didn't. The pain where this started is completely gone because I've encountered thousands probably of other little liars along the way. And I can recognize and say, hey, follow in your own excrement. I don't want it, I don't need it, I don't even want to smell it. You know? It's yours. Take it. So I hope that there was a growth moment, a growth quake for that person too. Yeah. Good question. All right. So the next poem is probably, I gotta warn you, to my right and left, I'm going to be channeling 3 different characters in this piece. It's a difficult poem for me because it's very personal. It's very violent, and it has been drawn. And I literally wrote this poem in probably 15 minutes because while this was happening, I was writing while it was happening in a separate room. So I'll describe the scenario for you first. I was home from college, and I did not like to go home. There was just too many bad memories. Still that abuse that was going on, and the one person that was back there taking the brunt of it was my mother. And I saw it and witnessed it too many times in my lifetime. And it literally made me physically ill to go home, knowing that it was still going to be there. And if it was on a weekend, most likely it was going to be there on a weekend. So getting the perspective in that moment, I was in a completely separate room when this horrible argument took place. And the argument that I'm going to project, imagine this argument probably 1,000 times worse, with words 1,000 times more hurtful, and anger that was frightening, and struck me silent, always, and it struck all of us silent, because my dad was just so volatile and unpredictable. But in this specific moment, I had the awareness to say, here's a capsule. Here's your mirror. It's ugly. It's really ugly. But I have to show it. Not just, I never shared this with my parents, but I have to show you how ugly what is going on is. It's really ugly. But I also had the moment of growth to say, And I'm going to throw a question out to you after I read this. So think about this while I'm reading it. Part of the poem depicts a garden. So there is a garden, nature. My dad was a farmer, as I mentioned. We grew so much of our own food because we were dirt poor, and we were, knocking on doors, asking if we could, pick the fruit that was falling from the tree so that we could can it and use it for our own good, so it didn't go to waste. So there is a garden as part of the theme in this poem. But it occurred to me after I wrote it, there's actually a second garden in this poem. So think about that. And after I read it, I want to talk about your perception of it, your thoughts about it, and that second garden. Right. And it's called The Tomatoes Were Falling Red. The wet placenta surrounding the seeds. You're a dirty, rotten son of a bitch! Bleeds in acidic juice. That's what you are! The milky yellow corn grins from its shuck. Pick it up, you stupid bitch! Pick it up! As his bottle spins. Now get the fuck out! But the flame on the stove was still waiting. You don't even give a shit about me! For the pot of vegetables. Do you? While in the garden, the tomatoes were falling red, ripe from the vine.
So,
One clear garden that is there and present. As I said, collecting food was so important for us. It was survival. The food that my mother canned, froze, preserved, all of that was what we pretty much lived on through the winter months. And if it wasn't for all of that, I remember being hungry. And that's not a good thing. But anybody want to take a guess at what the other garden in the poem actually is? It's the garden of the family. And isn't it a waste that the food that my mother was trying to prepare and preserve is ripening on its vine out in the garden and going to waste while this scenario is playing out. And it was constant. The other garden in the scene is the family. And if you cannot nurture the family, what a waste. What a waste of food. What a waste of that family unit. Just being buried by anger and fear and addiction and abuse. It's just a waste. So that's what comes out of that poem. And I was sitting in another room listening to this horrible argument take place while my mother was trying to, preserve food. And just thinking about that scene and what a waste. And in the moment I knew, I was like, even though I knew before that, the tremors were already there, but I was like, that will never be my life. It will never be a part of my life. I recognize the tremor too well of addiction and alcoholism and violence. I recognize it way too well. And I refuse to be a part of that waste. It's a waste of heart, it's a waste of space, it's a waste of soul, it's a waste of time. It is just a waste. And I knew it was time to move on and understand it. But no, right then and right there, I have a better plan where this doesn't exist. This garden will fall fallow. But mine doesn't have to. I can nourish it, nurture it, and let it be here today to blossom and to bloom and to share the fruit of that garden too. So that's that cool. Any comments?
I think you just wrote another poem with
I
that,
just
with that
said that
explanation.
to people. Like, we were talking about me.
Sometimes that happens. It does. Right? And it's on camera. But yeah, that was probably one of the most painful GrowthQuake moments in my life. But it was also the mirror. While I was projecting it to the mirror of my family, I was looking at myself too. I was like, you cannot let this continue. You cannot let this be your life. Cannot. Too much waste. And I think I've done a pretty good job holding that at bay. My old man creeps out once in a while.
Don't they all?
Yes. Totally. And now I'm the old man. And I see me creeping out myself. But in a good way. So tomatoes were falling red. Right. So I switched up the order of these poems the last minute. Because I wanted to make sure that I had that one out of the way and in my back pocket, and to let you know that there's always hope. And the thing that I don't know how I was able to hold on to, hope, the light, but I was able to. And I worked so hard to make sure that the light, not only in me, but in the people that I care about, is not extinguished. But I somehow knew that my source had to come first. My reinforcement had to be there before I could project it out and be genuine and authentic and know what the hell I was talking about. And I don't wait. This might shock a lot of you. You know me very well, or so you think you do. I do not wake up every day with my glass half full. I would say that on any given day, my glass when I wake up is only 43% full. And I have to work my ass off to get it up to that extra 7% to get it to the halfway mark. I really do. And I know why that is. It's because I carry some trauma inside of me that wants to push my glass half full to less than half full. But this next poem I wrote when I was 19 years old. And I think about this poem every week. Maybe not on a daily basis, but if I wake up when my glass might be, oh my God, some days it's only 30, and that's being generous, 30% full. But I think of this poem because it brought so much clarity to me when I felt this moment when I moved away to college, and I had this sense of freedom that I had never had, and the oppression, even though it's internalized, being in a different environment made me feel so free, and it made me think, I want to wake this way I want to wake up this way every day with vitality and energy and exuberance, and I want everybody around me to share that too. If I can project that excitement and exuberance for life, I was ready for it. And that's really what this poem is about. So the person, the character, I'm going to be channeling for this one, and it's called A Wish to Wake. It's actually me when I'm 19 and fresh out of the cornfield, very naive. A wish for you upon the event had not happened yet. So, but feeling that just exuberance, and I wanted to feel it every day. And this is what this poem is about. A wish to wake. I wish to wake as the blue jay wakes, quick to a piercing shrill, as his terror mocks the neighbor's cat and teases the scorning squirrel. I wish to rise as the 4 o'clocks rise, their vines twisted sweet with dew, and flesh petals white as a snow coin dropped on the lawn, all fresh and new. Most, I think, I wish to wake and listen from my bed as the blue jay calls through my window and the 4 o'clocks lift their white heads. So I've tried, that's what fills my glass every morning. Like I said, if I'm not feeling it, I literally think of this. If I can, some mornings when I go for a walk, if I hear a blue jay call in the distance, and they are loud, and they are aggressive, and they can be mean, I've been attacked by them, but I still respect them. I was probably doing something I shouldn't have been. If I can hear a blue jay's call, I literally inhale it. And I'm like, I remember that vitality in just a blue jay's call. And I remember that freshness of a lawn covered with dew and that precious bloom that's springing almost just for me. It's just for me. And if I can carry that in me every morning and every day, and if it rubs off on anyone in my periphery, amazing, fantastic. What a wish. I wish to wake for all of you. I wish those moments every morning. Take this up. Any questions or commentary?
The imagery is so powerful in that poem.
Yeah, nature, really, if I can capture the essence, there's always some frame of reference for me in nature that tickles my inside and reminds me of those moments when I was a child and hearing that blue jay's call for the first time, and that exuberance, I never want to give it up. And I'm so glad that I wrote this down in the moment when I was feeling it that morning, because it has been a beacon for me ever since. Ever since. All right. And last poem, but I do have to preface this with, I mentioned I'm a songwriter. I'm going to close out with an a cappella song that I wrote, which was a major GrowthQuake for me after this upcoming poem. It's The Girl in the Light. So don't leave after this poem. Stick around. Yeah. And that is a GrowthQuake for me. That's great. All right. The Girl in the Light. I have to give you a little bit of a background about this poem because this was inspired by somebody that I was so close to, worked with very closely on a daily basis. And this woman had my back every single day, unflinchingly, unquestionably. And it occurred to me, I was like, when I knew I was going to retire and that tether of light was going to get a little bit longer, I needed for her to know, because I think that women in general do not know the light that they are emitting. I see it, especially, I see it, and it's just so many women I know. I know this comes from seeing my mom's light almost be extinguished. And somebody asked me once when I read this poem to them, they said, were you the one who was always trying to reignite your mother's light? And I was like, oh my God, there's my GrowthQuake moment. My GrowthQuake moment was, yes, I was. I was the one who was always trying to keep my mother's light lit, my sister's, plural, lights lit. And every woman I encounter, I want to hold up a mirror to you, to show you the light that is you. Because you admit it, even though it's been probably pushed down, the wick has been burned, and sometimes I know you're exhausted. I cannot even imagine waking up to the challenges every single woman in this world, in this room, has to wake up to. There are so many unique challenges that women have to face, and I can't even. It almost breaks me to understand that light. It shall not, and it cannot be extinguished. Don't let anybody do that. Ever. Okay, get the tears out. And now, I will perform this. One other note. I also, when I read this poem to a friend, the character that I channeled was my 12-year-old me, who had a more southern accent. But it was genuine, because and I told her, I said, if I were your friend, when we were in 7th grade, this is what I would say to you. If I were your friend in 7th grade, this is what I would say to you before your light became extinguished, or it was threatened to be extinguished. And so I can say it now.
That's right.
All right, and it's called The Girl in the Light. Let the barbed wire stretched taut between the hickory posts rust through. Let it clink and plunk like banjo strings throwing a tune only you can dance to. Let your dress snag and snare without a care as you walk across that flowery meadow. Let the porch steps unfold to greet your feet at the cabin door. Let the dust of your history fall through the cracks and settle on the soft underbelly beneath the floorboards. Let your tangles of twine and scratches of wool ball together and roll silent into the corner. Let all this and every cockleburr and sharp spur blunt itself against your pitted armor, and when the sun rises and seeks you out, breathe deep down from the space between your toes and let it find you. For the girl in the light is the light, and the only one who casts no shadow. Oh, so open it up. Any commentary? Had some tears there. I thought I worked through all that. But seriously, women are amazing. You are my guiding light. You have been my protector in my life. You have been my best friend. You've been my mother. You've been my sister. And my crazy aunt. And I will not allow a light to be extinguished. That goes for men too. Do not let your light be extinguished. Because there are people out there who, through their own pain and their own lights being dimmed, they might be trying to dim yours. Right. So, right. This is the last performance, and this is the song. And I don't think I'll cry at this one. I've worked through this one a little bit. But there is a story to this one. It was the height of COVID, so like middle of 2020. And I had learned that a childhood friend of mine was an adult now, and she had grown kids of her own. And one of her boys was born with some major birth defects, and I got to hold this baby when he was just so small and so tiny. And I learned, and she and I, we drifted apart. That light is still there. Anytime I see her, no time has passed. But I learned that her son, with the disabilities, passed away. And it just did something to me that I was like, and at that time we were going through so much pain trying to raise our own son. And I had one of those moments where I was like, uncomfortable, here's a GrowthQuake, and literally feeling what it must feel like to lose a child. And so I wrote this song about that loss and about what you wouldn't do as a parent to bring that child back to you. And the title of the song is called "What More Can I Do to Bring You Back to Me?" So that's the title. But what I didn't realize until later was, oh my God, I was writing this song about my own loss. At that point, our son had chosen to kind of remove himself from our lives. And while I worked really, really hard to understand that and try to support it in a healthy way, it hurt like hell. It ripped me apart. And I don't think I understood how much it really hurt me until I had that GrowthQuake moment where I was like, I was writing this song about my own pain too, but I was channeling it to somebody else, to this wonderful woman who had lost her son, who had been, this woman, a great source, and she was a neighbor, so she knew the history of my upbringing. She'd been a great source, a wonderful light and light source for me. But I realized I actually wrote this song about my own pain. So it's called, and I want you to picture, because again, a character emerged and said, you need to write this song, here's your voice, and here's who I am. And the character is Irish. So you'll hear, even though it's difficult to sing in Irish with an Irish accent, You know, it always comes out as English. But this character, and I envisioned him literally standing on the precipice of this enormous and vast space that was empty because of that loss. Just literally stepping to the precipice. And you know, I don't know if you know any of the Irish, but they say that, you know, we're full of pain, and I've got some Irish in me. You know, we're full of pain and sorrow, but we're also full of piss and vinegar too. So keep that. All right, so I'll do my best. I'm a little bit hoarse, but I think I can get through this. I'm talking a lot. It's the most I talked since months. All right, so the song is called "What More Can I Do to Believe?" What more can I do to believe that? And just in case. And it's talking about what all of the things that I would do to literally bring you back to that. I'd stand against the winds to turn back time. I'd steal the moon from the night and take control of the tides. I'd set fire to the raging oceans, then extinguish them so you could see that my heart will never falter. No, what more can I do to bring you back to me? I'd gather all the stars in the northern sky, turn sands into water, run the rivers dry. I'd set fire to the raging oceans and extinguish them so you could see that my heart will never falter. No, what more can I do to bring you back to me? I'd climb to the highest mountain, in my hands I'd collect the sky. I'd stop the rotation of the planets, then realign them in the patterns of your eyes. I'd tear down the mighty rock of Gibraltar, then rebuild it just so you could see that my heart will never falter. No, what more can I do to bring you back to me? I tear down the mighty rock of Gibraltar, then rebuild it just so you could see that my heart will never falter. No, what more can I do to bring you back to me? What more can I do to bring you back to me?
Thank you. Thank you all. I think for not leaving.
Final commentary. You know, I try to live true to myself, but I love holding up a mirror and showing people the amazing people that are. I see it. I hope you see it. I hope you saw it tonight. And I hope that you can hold up your own mirrors, reflect your children, reflect your parents, reflect joy. And don't be afraid to reflect that pain, because there is growth in these quakes that you're feeling. You might not know it in the moment, but it's all good. It's all growth, and it serves you well to put it in your pocket as a tool so that it will resurface. Every tool, every growth moment that you put in your pocket, it will resurface. You will need it in small ways and major ways. But don't forget to listen. 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 All right. That concludes the evening. And feel free to mingle, ask me any questions you want to about construction of the poems, any themes that you want to hit on that really stood out for you. Nature runs true. If you can find that essence of nature that draws you into it, there's always purity there, and inspiration. Find it.
Perfect.